So thank you for everyone coming to our state non-credit data project learning community. We've been doing these meetings for a while now, and I think I've been going really great. I think we have a good session for us today. I'm Justin Vinton. I'm with the Education Foundation Research Center, Rutgers. Unfortunately, Michelle Van Noy will not be here with us today due to a death in the family. So I'll be taking over some of what she was going to present. We have Dana Brandt from Strada also here with us, and Lesley Hirsh from the NJDOL, and Robert McGough from the Arkansas Department of Transportation and Shared Services. So just to give a little background, I know a lot of you may know this already, but one of the reasons and the motivations for us starting this project is that, non-credit data reporting is very mixed across states, as we know. And I'm not going to get into all of the specifics here, but there are really challenges in collecting it. There's a lack of consistent definitions and inconsistent data collection and various structures and financial motivations and mandates for collecting this. So it's very varying across states. So the idea is to build a better data ecosystem in non-credit. So the leaders of this project are really discussing what stages are there to build infrastructure on non-credit education, non-degree credentials. And the idea is to share our research findings from across the states with this project, develop a national taxonomy for non-credit data, and to promote efforts related to the sharing of practices across states. So this is really an idea to be state-driven. We're doing some research on this, but we really want you as state leaders to be the drivers of this. So the goals of this project are to continue to generate research to better understand non-credit education, advance the development of our infrastructure nationally and within states, continue to refine our national data taxonomy to guide national, state, and institutional data collection efforts, and expand our national learning community towards peer learning and to share knowledge and build networks at the state level. So this is just a kind of a look of where our project has gone and where we've been. So originally we started with 3 states to develop to kind of think about the taxonomy that we were developing, and the thinking about taking stock of what exists in these 3 states in terms of an inventory. So essentially we're looking at the non-credit data that they collect and creating an inventory for it. It's essentially like a list of types of data that they collect. And that's course and program level data. And then we did this again in phase 2 with 5 more states. And again, these were even more highly varied in terms of non-credit data collection than our previous 3 states. And the idea for phase 3, which we're working on now, is to have a national expansion to get data and think about and work with more partner states, advance this national learning community where states are kind of engaging directly, and to build our national data taxonomy. So this is our organizational map, primarily led by our learning community, which is right now, and the research that we're doing. Again, we can share these slides afterwards. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but this is just kind of structure for the project. And then this was our original data taxonomy. And this is why I think Lesley Hirsh here from NJDOL is helpful, because this was what we had from the first 3 states. And its purpose and design, outcomes, enrollment and demographics, finance, and policy. And after going into New Jersey and looking at their work with the Department of Labor there, we realized we had to expand this and think more strategically about the data that states may be collecting. So this was our original data, but and again, I want to kind of highlight what's going on in New Jersey. So this is, and Lesley, please feel free to hop in. But and again, I'm not going to go over all of this, but it really kind of, as researchers, made us think to when we collected data and spoke with people at the NJDOL like Lesley, for us to think about expanding this taxonomy, because they were doing things that we hadn't really thought of. So this is essentially what has been added to our taxonomy, and hopefully we will build on this with more states in the data we're looking at. So admissions, accessibility, provider information, student services, student costs, WIOA info. So just to kind of give you a clearer picture of what that looks like, all of the new components from our second round of data collection are highlighted and are not highlighted, they're italicized in bold. So under purpose and design, we looked at admission, accessibility, provider information, student services, and then in finance and policy, we looked at student costs and WIOA information. So and the eligible training provider list, which I'm sure Lesley will get into. So that's kind of just setting up. I think for Lesley or Dana, maybe if you want to take over from me, I just wanted to give a kind of a background of the project and what we're doing now, and where our taxonomy stands as it is and how it is growing based on what states are doing around the country. So Dana, I can kick it off to you, or Lesley, if you want to share your screen and go over the Training Explorer, which I think is really interesting for people to see as well.
Great. Hi, everybody. Going by Dana's run of show. Wonderful to see some very familiar faces here. And it's also wonderful to make the acquaintance of many people in higher education who may not be all that familiar with the sort of workforce side of the house. We definitely share responsibility with our higher education partners in New Jersey, and I know across the country, in trying to help people become prepared for their own flourishing in their own adult lives, but also for employment and for career advancement throughout their lives. And so in New Jersey, the eligible training provider list, which is is something that was defined initially through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or originally WIA and then WIOA, is supposed to be, in most states, it is supposed to be the list of training programs that's eligible to receive individual training accounts through the one-stops or the American Job Center system. In New Jersey, it's slightly different in that New Jersey has some dedicated state workforce development training funds. And if a training provider in the state of New Jersey wants to be eligible to receive any kind of tuition subsidy or grant, they must be on the eligible training provider list. So that means not only ETPL and that's eligible training provider list, ETPL in New Jersey is for any state or federal training dollars. And so that already kind of sets us a bit apart, and I think is potentially a model for other states to think about as we talk a little bit through some of the other questions that I know Robert and my colleague Robert, hi Robert, and in Arkansas, and Dana have prepared for us to discuss. The other thing that's quite a little different in New Jersey is that, excuse me, that we also have some statutory requirements. One of our statutory requirements is to be as transparent as possible about the outcomes that are available. So sort of a risk reward bunch of information through something called the Consumer Report Card. And we have statute that is written that requires us to publish a Consumer Report Card. And then last but not least, I think the other thing that really sets us apart, and again, something that we're happy to share some of the language around, is some statutory and regulatory authority that actually gives us quite a bit of leeway in collecting information. Doesn't mean we're successful at it, and let's be perfectly frank, we're not. It's always a learning process for all of us to be able to obtain the kind of quality and extent of data that we're looking for. But we are allowed to ask for just about anything. In fact, we're allowed to require just about anything. And so I'll go ahead and go through the Training Explorer. I have here a landing page for our 24/7 digital career platform called My Career NJ. I do want to shout out Nancy Hiller, the director of one of my divisions, who is the project executive or product executive over My Career NJ. And so there's a lot more on My Career NJ, but one of the things that we have on here is our ETPL tool, which is called the Training Explorer. So we're going to go ahead and jump there. And I don't want to spend a lot of time because I know we want to have, rather than a presentation, we want to have a bit of more of a moderated discussion. So as you can see, this is a training catalog essentially, and it's searchable and interactive. So my very favorite thing to search for is welding. And I can see here that in the state of New Jersey, I have 59 eligible programs, and this changes from day to day. As many of you know, their schools and programs go in and out of compliance. So there are 59 programs. We have about 4,500 programs on our eligible training provider list. 59 of them are in welding. They're all over the state. We can see that we have some training outcomes here. I will show you in just a moment the way the consumer report card is going to be added to the Training Explorer, but at the moment we just have some outcomes identified on the Training Explorer. So yeah, I'm all right. I'm really excited about the fact that there are 59 programs, but I don't really, but I'm going to say I live in Camden County. Camden County is in South Jersey, and it's in the Philly area, and there are four training programs in Camden County. And beyond that, I don't think it's a really good idea for welding to be done online. So I think I'm going to just make sure that this is in person. And luckily, all four of them are offered in person. There are also all four of them offered in the evening, from what I recall. So as you can see, there are four different programs here. I believe all of them are at Camden County College, which is in the community college system. And I'm kind of interested in knowing what's the difference between them. So in a glance, I'm just going to really quickly do a quick comparison between these. I think I can only do three at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and show me some things about these three. One is CNC. I'm not that excited about CNC. I really want to get welding. So here's one with a trade math lab and professional development. I'm going to go ahead and see some details. And as you can see in here, I can then see a great deal of additional information, including the employment rate. I believe this is 1 year after completion. The average salary, not that great here. This is rather old. It's going to be updated in the space of about a month. But we can see that there are a number of other pieces of information here that are useful, both for the training seeker as well as for any professional who might be working with a training seeker. So this has an awful lot more information, but I think ultimately what's really important to see is that our driving motivation for collecting information is not just to have a lot of data, which is always fun for us data people, but it's to actually surface that information for career seekers and training seekers so they understand the full extent of opportunities available to them for their career advancement. In addition to that, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to change screens and reshare. Sheesh, let's see. Stop share. Let's see if I can reshare and show you what our consumer report card looks like. I mentioned to you earlier that we have consumer report card. Here it is. So as I mentioned, we're collecting this information. We modernized the system and so have a whole new set of data that we're going to be incorporating. Here's a mock-up of what we'd like this consumer report card to look like. Hopefully you can see it. It's not too small. But you can see the consumer report card is right here in the middle. So we're pulling from some of the performance data that we have to collect, and we're trying to surface information that we know from our user testing is important to the people who are searching for training. How many people finished the training? How many people were employed after 6 months, after a year? What did they earn? This is an annualized quarterly wage, so it actually is meaningful as opposed to a quarterly rate wage, which almost nobody actually, gee, Robert, what did you make last year in your job in Arkansas? Oh, I made such and such per quarter. It's not the way we usually talk to one another. And then, as many of you know, if you're familiar with wage records, we do not have occupational information, but we have industry information. And so we think it's important to show people what are the top industries in which people are working. So for example, if you're studying the executive data science program, we prefer not to see you working in fast food, for example. We'd rather see you working in something like computer systems design or insurance, which are the top industries that employ data scientists in the state of New Jersey. Finally, another thing that we are about to, this fall, we'll be starting to send out to our training providers themselves, our training provider report cards. These are, without going into a ton of detail, these are the indicators that we're going to be measuring on every single program. What we're looking at are several dimensions of quality. And the idea here is to try to encourage continuous improvement so that we're actually lifting up all of the training programs over time. So we ask every program to report a number of demographic information or variables on gender, race, ethnicity, age, disability status of each of their enrollees. And we run a regression model that shows how each of these programs does in terms of employment rates, earnings, completion, as well as how they do in terms of first year earnings gains, so that we can, and all of this is adjusted based on the demographic characteristics of the enrollment. So there's a ton more information here, but I don't want to take up any more time. I just wanted to make sure we got across to you that the purpose of this data collection is so that we can, yes, in addition to understanding and reporting on the quality of our training, we're also making that information as friendly and available to the broadest possible audience that we can, and using that information to do some quality assurance and consumer protection. Thanks, Justin.
Great. Thanks so much, Leslie. That's super interesting. I've played around with the Training Explorer myself, so I think it's great, and I'm glad you're the quality assurance is very important too and exciting.
Lesley, I'm sorry, are we supposed to wait till the end for questions?
I
I think I asked you this before, but do y'all have thresholds for your state scholarships? Because I love the way that this is displayed, the employment rate, the wages and all that. But do you have threshold for your state scholar? I mean, not that you need to tell me now, but do you have thresholds that must be met for the state? I know you can't control federal, but for the state scholarships.
You mean for the training for the ITAs? Right
Yes.
now, every year we have a different threshold. We're about to increase our maximum threshold or our average threshold for each local area to
Okay.
$7,500. And so we're keeping an eye on what's going to be happening to that to tuition. But Dana,
Okay.
I'm sure you want to manage
Yeah.
the input. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, yeah. You can have Robert go too. Well, yeah, Dana, go ahead. Yeah. Robert, would you like to tell us what's going on in Arkansas?
Sure. And Jake's here too, so feel free to chime in, Jake. We kind of come as a package.
Great.
Let me share my screen here. Okay. And so here's just can everyone see my screen with the key efforts?
We cannot.
No, not right now.
There's something on somebody's screen at the top that says 3 enhancing consumer report cards, but it
Oh,
shows
that's
as a box, not as a, yeah.
Here we go. Great.
Okay.
You're good, Robert.
All right. I wanted to start out with just kind of like a high level view so we can kind of get into the interactive discussion. And this is like a little bit chronological. So for us, and I'll just say non-degree is sort of a placeholder for non-degree, non-credit, like non-traditional credentials. We largely started with non-degree education outcomes measurement as a response to the all individuals measures for the ETA 9171. Lesley mentioned the eligible training provider list. This is federally required reporting from the U.S. Department of Labor on all of the outcomes from all the programs on the ETPL. There was a change made in 2018, but with waivers, most states didn't really have to start reporting this till a few years ago, where it went to individual level kind of reporting for all individuals that participated in a program that was on the ETPL. It didn't matter if they were funded by WIOA. It didn't matter if there were 0 individuals funded under WIOA. Any program that was on the eligible training provider list had to report everyone who participated in the program, whether they completed the program, and all of the normal outcomes, second and fourth quarter earnings and employment, credential attainment, and measurable skills gains, and like all of that good stuff. Our institutions weren't thrilled about the idea of having to do a whole bunch of surveying and things like that to collect that. but many of them knew that we were already putting out consumer information reporting that had a lot of the same stuff, and asked us, hey, is this a way that we could help with the longitudinal data system? And that turned out to be a great opportunity, because we were able to take the eligible training provider list and kind of hook it to the same longitudinal data we use for consumer reporting and IPEDS reporting and things like that, and provide those outcomes. So we were able to save the institutions a lot of time. We were able to prove the accuracy and coverage on that. And when we brought those together, and by we, I mostly mean Jake, found all kinds of differences between what was in the higher education information systems and what was reported for the eligible training provider list. So it also drove some bidirectional data quality improvements both way, when FICE codes didn't match, or SIPs didn't match, or the way institutions and their campuses were structured. It really helped make sure that everything had to be consistent across the board. And it really drove a lot of increased awareness of longitudinal data across institutions, and really, it was helping them, so it made them fans, and they started using it for other things. And so that was the compliance side of doing it for what was required by federal reporting. But then also out of that, a lot of institutions 2 and 4 years started saying, okay, this is great, you're giving us the outcomes, we still have to track the cohorts, we still have to track who is enrolled, persisting, completing in non-credit programs. And this was really sort of like Jake's baby when we wrote the IS SDS grant, something he's really wanted to build for a long time. And the institutions were really asking for, they said, look, if you just give us a system, a student management system, but for the non-credit side of the house, that will help us. And it's beneficial to us, because data quality at the source, if we can give them a place to have those high quality controls and structured domains and things like that, drops down out of a bunch of text, that's the last best place to control data quality. That helps us. So we were actively working on this non-traditional student management system, which I think probably a little bit later this year we'll have some more information to be able to show and tell on a little bit. Part of what we want with that is to kind of get out to the credential registry. So we're doing a lot of credential registry publishing. We're using Credential Engine to push out the linked open data and credentials. This is for transparency, so it's human machine readable across anything we use. We pull from the registry, but it's available for anything else. Consumer information. It's also very helpful for providing context for learning employment records and administrative data. I think those are the verbs of somebody got a credential. And then with the registry, we can really break it down to what were the learning opportunities? What were the skills? And that's where increasingly in our skills-based marketplace, things like that, we can activate the value of that credential with skills, so that someone can understand, oh, what did I learn? How does that articulate? How does that help me connect with an opportunity and stack with other things? As far as education quality outcome standards, this is a partnership with Burning Glass Institute. We know a lot from our administrative data about outcomes of non-degree credentials. In this case, Burning Glass Institute, which is the nonprofit side of Lightcast, they have a lot of additional data that we can pair with our administrative data to, especially Lesley mentioned occupation. So it's different sources, different provenance, veracity of the information, but they know occupation progression, all of these things that we don't necessarily have for administrative data. So we're working to kind of get a better data set for measuring the quality of non-degree credentials across 5 different measures. And some of that is really focused, because it takes a lot of time kind of going through that data, curating that data, looking at it. So we're really focused on occupations relevant to military, vet spouses, families, and justice involved. And we'll just kind of keep going a little chunk at a time, working through those, looking at jobs that mobilize for those populations, what are the related skills, and where are the related credentials, largely looking at non-degree credentials, that contain those skills. And then finally, what we're super excited about, and I believe Rebecca from National Accreditation Commission is on here, we're currently working on something called the Accreditation Information Hub with the National Accreditation Commission and OpenAI. And so this is an AI-enabled application to streamline the application to get on lists like the ETPL from providers. Review from the state side, it can save a ton of time. Facilitating more streamlined accreditation in a much smaller amount of time, which could be very important for short-term Pell expansion, GI-Bill, increasing state funding for non-credit education, and registry publishing. Because we've noticed we can use AI to parse the skills, but we need somebody to review that and verify that, and ideally like check it once a year. And it's democratizing that out across. I mean, we have 22,000 for-credit learning opportunities and many more like non-credits. So it's a way to kind of really use technology to take a lot of the lift out and like spread that out across the providers. I'd be happy to drop links into our credential registry collections and things like that, like as we go. But I wanted to kind of like surface at the high level of like what we're currently working on to improve the collection, management, and use of non-credit and non-degree data.
Well, thank you both so much, Robert and Lesley. And if folks have questions for them, please add them in the chat. I want to take a step back for a minute and kind of go a little bit higher level on what WIOA is and why we're talking about it today before I have some questions for both Lesley and Robert. So as they've outlined, WIOA is a federal workforce development legislation, and under WIOA, states are required to be collecting non-credit and other credential data, integrating those records with employment and earnings data, and then publishing those education to employment outcomes. But these efforts are often siloed in state workforce agencies, despite the fact that as the Workforce Almanac reports, roughly 1/3 of WIOA eligible training providers are in fact institutions of higher education. So the credential data is housed within those systems that we would think of having it, but then the employment outcomes and the publishing of that might not be known to those folks. So WIOA is a really useful template for states as you're beginning to collect non-degree and non-credential data. And it's an opportunity for state higher education agencies and state education to employment data systems to strengthen their partnerships with workforce agencies. And both New Jersey and Arkansas are great examples of that. So Lesley, can you share with us how you've actually leveraged partnerships with other agencies to improve your collection and reporting of both degree and non-degree occupationally focused training programs?
So I think that we have a long road ahead of us to engage other agencies. We've very much gone at this, I say alone, but it's not really quite alone, with a number of other partners to help us fund this effort that I just showcased for everyone, but also, to think through the effort, and happy to chat a little bit more about those other kinds of partners. But right now, we very much want to work with our community colleges, and in order to bring in, we don't know what we don't know. As I like to say, it's always hard to find out what it is that you're missing. So we're trying to figure out a way of, if possible, requiring that non-credit programs be published on our Training Explorer. And similar to Robert, we're also putting all of our ETPL on credential registry, although it's not yet identified as a collection. That's where we're moving next. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and Robert, same question for you. How are you leveraging partnerships with across sectors in the state to improve collection and reporting?
Well, particularly for public supported, at least we're doing federal reporting, and we're working with the Department of Education or the Department of Commerce. But so much when you get to non-degree, like so much of that is privates, or we're even our private institutions are voluntarily reporting because they see the benefit of like being in the consumer information products, and as we're putting things out. But where it really starts getting cross-sector is we're doing a lot right now, as I mentioned, with military. And so we're really having to cross over and how to do that translation of how did a military employment or military experience, how does that articulate over to the civilian world, and maybe simultaneously, particularly working with the National Guard. They're part-time employed, but they're usually with the military, they're also in civilian employment. And so in that case, it's really, we're having to kind of learn their language, they're having to learn our language. We're kind of having to work together to develop a crosswalk, but at the same time realizing that these military occupations, they're in every state. So we don't want an Arkansas specific cross-reference and just trying to figure out what is everyone else doing, so we don't have to, so we don't, you know, duplicate effort that's already been done, or maybe we can all divide it up because we've got different missions from other states. The kind of other big area for us right now, we're focused on justice involvement. And so there are a ton of community-based organizations there helping all along the sequential intercept model, whether it's, you know, prison education programs or, you know, different intercepts pre or post, because there's a lot of training and education and skills that are acquired during incarceration through prison education programs, through programs like Goodwill has a reentry accelerator. So they were actually one of the first ones we put in the credential registry and started issuing LERs and things like that. Just trying to find places where skills are being attained, but maybe they weren't being documented and communicated. So like finding that kind of like that dark data that just didn't really exist. There are lots of like other things, but a lot of our big focus right now this year is like military and justice involved. So like most of our cross-sector work and publishing and stories is going to be around those areas.
Thanks for sharing. And I think we've got a lot of questions in the chat about non-state partners. So federal resources, nonprofit partners, or private vendors. Can you share any particular partners who've really helped accelerate your efforts? And I'll start with you, Lesley, since you're on mute.
Sure. So I think we started on this, the Training Explorer, and the whole idea of modernizing and really building out the data collection around the ETPL with the Data for the American Dream grant that many of you may have heard of, that came out back in 2019. So there were 3 states, Colorado, Michigan, and New Jersey, and this was our Data for the American Dream grant. That was made possible by Schmidt Futures as well as from Lumina Foundation. We have since been able to pull in some state dedicated funding for it, but we've had no fewer than, I don't know, 4 software partners. Pivotal, which is no longer, it's been bought out by VMware. Ripple, many of you have heard of the Research Improving People's Lives. Agate Technologies, which built our underlying system that pulls in all of this data. Fearless Technologies, which is building, you know, My Career NJ. Robert and I met initially through the National Skills Coalition Policy Academy, where we developed our quality assurance framework and our new consumer report card design. Heldrick, nothing would be complete here without talking about the Heldrick Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers, who's a very, very important partner in New Jersey, also who houses the state longitudinal data system, where our wage matching was actually conducted, and by whom our consumer report card and quality assurance analyses are being done. And last but not least, our Governor's Office of Innovation. So not done alone, tons and tons of partners, just not a lot of other agency partners, but a ton of other types of partners. Over to you, Robert. I'm sure you've got plenty of, oh, and yeah, I got to call out the credential engine. Thanks.
I'm hesitant to speak because I know I'll forget somebody, but just because there's so many people helping out, because there's just so much. So in not in any particular order, the National Governors Association has run multiple different cohorts, and all those materials are out there. Skills-driven states, skills-less states have been just super helpful, you know, like fundamental education and just like connecting with resources. Of course, Credential Engine. We meet with Credential Engine several times a week. They're kind of part of our team. They're just super helpful at like thinking through like how to publish things, how to properly publish apprenticeships, which are kind of both education and work experience at the same time, or just constantly getting into new things that haven't been published before. So they've been amazing, like thought partners, and constantly holding community so we can collaboratively develop, the model out. Of course, right now, and National Accreditation Convention, as I mentioned, is a super big thought partner as we're trying to kind of start thinking about non-credit accreditation. We're bringing that experience there. We also work with Research Improve People's Lives a lot. We shared like common underlying foundation there. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, like a lot of like it doesn't specifically say non-credit, non-degree, like so much of what they do is applicable there and is just foundational, especially when we're thinking about demand driven and kind of getting like timely information on the full talent pipelines, but also alternate methodologies for financing talent. They have a great paper out there on that. I'm sure like I missed a few big ones, and I know I mentioned like BGI earlier, and Jake will probably drop some things in the chat.
Oh, it's great that states don't have to go it alone. I think that long list really proves that even if it starts out in these efforts start in one agency, and you're having trouble finding partners in another agency, you have partners outside in other states and in the nonprofit sector and with vendors. I wanted to ask you what unanticipated challenges you've encountered in your non-credit journey, and then how you've worked to overcome these. So, Robert, would you like to start us off?
And Jake, jump in here because like Jake's the one that does the heavy lifting, but on this stuff, I think it particularly came to, but we outlined the outcomes measures, but a lot of the non-credit providers didn't have very good collection initially, as far as especially collecting identifiers if they didn't collect SSN, and we're currently, our traditional UIOH data had SSN first name, last name. If you have date of birth, first name, last name, it doesn't work. We have like 600 Mark Johnsons in Arkansas, and we're itty bitty. So having to work with them and kind of like get them to the point of even collecting the right identifiers in the first place was a big challenge in the first year. And now Jake, he does a lot of education, works with them like year after year, and we've gotten like really good like coverage and quality that we're just thrilled with there. I think the other thing was, like I mentioned, when we first, which was valuable, everything's an opportunity to learn and grow, like took the eligible training provider list and bounced it up against the higher education information system, which had never been done before. And we just saw, how much didn't match in terms of the FICE codes, which are the institutions, the campuses, the SIP codes, a lot of that stuff did not match as well as like we thought it should. But like that was an opportunity, like I say, like to drive quality both ways.
Additionally, and I just put it in the chat, moving towards this sort of a centralized data system for them to make use of will help with the fact that a lot of our smaller providers, they've not been collecting those identifiers because they've been afraid of having to store them and secure them and things like that. So having it centralized behind our firewalls and things like that will open that door for some of these additional providers that have historically avoided engaging with this area because they couldn't get the information needed to do the outcomes reporting. They were afraid of also the amount of work that goes into that outcomes reporting, but by having us help them with that, both from their data collection perspective of securing their data, but also us providing the connection to the wage records and things like that to provide those needed calculations. That's opening doors for them so that they're not having to have so much fear or concerned amount of work that goes into it. Because the other part of it is unless you've been embedded within the WIOA reporting outcomes measures, identifying the whole second quarter after exit, fourth quarter after exit, who's supposed to be in that group and that analysis for that outcome measure is very confusing. So taking that out of their hands as being their responsibility and having it in code so that they just have to go, here's my outcomes for this time period, and not have to even conceptualize that this group of people is from 18 months ago or 24 months ago compared to these people now. So there's been a lot of thought going into those aspects of it to try and really open the door for access for these additional providers to be able to access these funds, to let additional students make use of these opportunities across the state.
It was so well put, Jake. Absolutely. I think our providers are pretty used to the fact that we demand Social Security numbers, and yet it really does, when push comes to shove, really does come down to having the infrastructure, the secure infrastructure available and ready to go. I am frankly quite surprised and would love to hear from those of you who are attending today that more non-credit programs are not interested in hearing about their employment outcomes. I think as more and more providers and colleges are moving toward understanding what their employment outcomes are, they will be very happy to know that this is something that we provide to them for free. And so, and that doesn't require multiple MOUs and so forth. We own all your data. And we're your partners in that data ownership. And so, I really think that that's the ultimate value proposition. Our biggest, and none of this was sort of unanticipated. I mean, our biggest challenge by far was we were all on paper when I first started a little bit more than 7 years ago. Yes, and some of these files were uploaded as Excel sheets in the past, but our entire system was a paper-based system. And so all of this has had to happen. Digitization of the entire ETPL system had to happen before we could even think about building that website. So as everybody who works for any state knows, it's not easy. Change management in a state government environment is not easy, and that's been really difficult for all of us. I guess there was one other thing that I was thinking of unanticipated, not unanticipated, Robert has said, it's that coverage and quality issue. I thought we were doing a great job on compliance and really staying on top of our quarterly reporting. Indeed, our coverage still is not going to be as extensive as I'd hoped. So we're just, this is our first year trying to do the consumer report card on the Training Explorer, and we'll have a pretty good coverage, but it's going to have to be a lot better next year. We're just going to have to tighten up and try to get it. And it wasn't a question of good reporting of Social Security numbers or lack of reporting on demographics. It was literally just submitting the darn reports and getting all of our providers to submit reports that have program information on them.
So I just wanted to hop in real quick. This has all been great so far. To provide some context for some things I dropped in the chat that came from our center. There's some center reports, and it's related to the fact that there are so many players in the non-credit and non-degree space that states and at the national level may work with. So that's kind of providing some context and a list. I think the last link I dropped in the chat has a list of from, I think it was from 2022, so it still needs to be updated, and we're thinking about doing that. But the players in the country that are involved, because there's a variety of actors, and it's a very busy space and quickly moving. So I think it would be helpful for states to know what and I see the conversations happening in the chat, who states are working with to develop their infrastructure. So I think that can be a good resource and something we'll be thinking about in the future as well. Dana, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, really quick, Dana, I just wanted to say our digital system for collecting program, provider, and student data was also a custom build, although it was based on grants management system that many states use.
That's great. Now people don't have to just remember everything that was shared today. There's an actual written resource that they can check out after. Well, I have one last question for both Lesley and Robert. What do you each see as the most untapped potential in this space for collecting and reporting on non-credit education and training data?
skills. It comes down to skill. Everything we're doing, we're trying to like get down to skills as the common language, because that's what opens up that articulation, that connection opportunity, that just kind of like trends, moving it towards, I like it like GPS, like a very like guided, personalized navigation. So that's we're putting a lot of eggs in the skills basket.
Yep, I ditto that. I would say Robert and I are both working or have both worked with Ripple, and we're really trying to build out on the model that we have right now, identifying and being able to use skills information. And I won't go into a ton of detail unless people ask me to, skills information to then generate customized recommendations to people. So when people come into we have a different application on My Career NJ. People come in, upload their resume. Based on their resume, we can then tell them, gee, you're a medical assistant, Dana, and you have an associate degree. These are the skills that you say you have. Go ahead and customize those and let us know what the skills you have. These are the skills that you should get, and here are some training programs you can take that will help you boost your income based on the data that we have in our historical records. And so using causal modeling to be able to generate real recommendations, not just sort of LinkedIn or, kinds of recommendations that are just skills adjacencies, but based on the historical experiences of people who your states have in your data systems.
Thank you both for sharing. It looks like most of the questions in the chat, folks have been chiming in and answering. I'm just taking 1 second to look back through and see if we've missed anything here. But thank you again for sharing the perspectives of your states and all the progress you've made to link these non-credit, non-degree data with other education and training and create a cohesive ecosystem for learners to access and understand what their opportunities are. Justin, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Sure, thanks. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. Maybe we can, just open it up. It seems like the chat is pretty being used. But if we want to, if somebody wants to speak and ask Lesley or Robert any questions, or any of us, I think we have some time for that.
One topic we didn't cover, Dana, was the possibility of there being a short-term or very short-term workforce Pell Grant and having that tied to the ETPL. I'd say that it's one thing that will provide a much larger carrot than our $7,500 ITAs will provide. And so the more, if we can manage to get a decent, just, fair short-term Pell program that requires reporting and perhaps even relies on the ETPL, I think we'll see much better coverage of non-degree programs on programs like mine and the one that Robert has, and on the credential registry.
Anyone have any questions for our guests? Rebecca?
Yeah, I have a question for Lesley. It's really interesting. You brought up short-term Pell, and Robert, thank you so much for the plug earlier. It's been a real privilege working with the state of Arkansas. We saw the new version of Workforce Pell coming out in the Senate bill, and they're going to force this 70% completion, 70% job placement. What portion of your schools in your state, and Robert, I'd be curious where your head is at on that too, will actually be ready to deploy short-term Pell right out of the gate, just attempting to meet that criteria alone? And how can we sort of help facilitate the process of getting the schools ramped up for the passage looking like July of 2026?
I would say our median employment rate at 2 is 70%, and so 50% exactly are ready to ramp up. And so, my own feeling, and I will say I'm not speaking on behalf of the state of New Jersey, but just as a professional analyst in this area, I think it's unwise to create one single standard, especially a standard that many, particularly programs that are serving, say, justice involved individuals, they're facing barriers to attaching to the labor market that other people are not facing. And so we're going to be creating a real disincentive if we stick with some kind of standard, like a 70% flat across the board standard. That's why our quality assurance is regression adjusted. And so I know that's a lot of work, but hopefully we've got a little bit of ramp up time so that we can give the Department of Labor and Congress some feedback on that 70% standard. I hear you, Rebecca. I'm right there with you.
So we still have some time. We have about 8 minutes left for some questions. I also put up our 2 QR codes for the State Non-Credit Data Project, as well as the taxonomy I talked about in the beginning of this meeting. No one, any of our panelists, Dana, do you have any, maybe we can go back to one of our other questions. We have time.
Well, I can think of one more for both of our
Yeah.
panelists, which would be if you were starting over again, what 3 things would you want to have in place? And I won't hold you to 3 if you can only think of 1 or 5, or you prefer to think of 5. How would you like to tackle collecting this data and reporting out employment outcomes?
Well, I can say that my partner in crime, Nancy Heller, who's I mentioned earlier, has done a really fantastic job of bringing training providers along for the ride during, for change management and being able to get their input on what we're collecting and how we're collecting it. But I'd say before we even started, I would start all over again by actually going directly to the training providers and including community colleges and bringing them along for the ride. I think you'd all be very, very surprised. Maybe I was that there wasn't a lot of pushback when we started asking for all this data, that there wasn't a lot of pushback when we said that we were going to be measuring outcomes and publicizing those outcomes, because I think they were really looking for the outcomes, A, and B, they were looking for a fair playing field. They know that some of their colleagues are less than the finest actors in the world, and they want to make sure that there's a level playing field for the people who are playing well and who are actually trying to create, high quality training and prepare people for careers.
What a great lesson to leave other states who might be starting this journey to start to collect non-credit data. Robert, what are your words of wisdom?
Well, and I'm actually looking at the right side of the screen with non-credit data taxonomy. It's like I'm a standards junkie. I'm all about interoperability. I'm like, how do we collect the information right and not speaking Arkansas specific language? And we've been collecting non-credit data for like 6 or 7 years, but not always in the same way. And we've expanded what we collect in our higher education information system because it wasn't like as robust as what we collect on the for credit side, and we've only been doing the TPL thing for like 3 or 4 years. So I think had we had a standardized like data taxonomy at the beginning, like that would have probably been the most awesome thing. So we wouldn't have to spend time figuring that out, or our longitudinal data would be more consistent over a longer period of time.
Robert, one of the things that we're trying to incorporate and have added to our data collection is a work-based learning component, and if it's included in that non-credit training, part of which is, the research clearly is that these potentially have higher employability and higher wages post. And so the mention of level playing fields, maybe one group is doing it with heavy work-based learning and another one is not. Are y'all attempting to collect that information?
I think there's room for improvement, but yes, and particularly with our Arkansas education reform, which is like Learns for K through 12 and access for higher education, work-based learning is a big focus. So as we're building out our new student success planning system and things like that, it's tracking everything from work-based learning, experiential learning standpoint. It's like I mean, we did go beyond like Rapids and beyond traditional registered apprenticeship before with a apprenticeship focus system, but now we're kind of coming at it from the direction of looking at work-based learning, experiential learning, from a broader lens of tracking education programs and student participation, because we also want to that to result in articulation of skills, any kind of LERs or anything we can do, so that even as a community service experience.
Well, in our legislative session just ended, there was even something proposed as far as tax breaks for business and industry. So, that would be great. I don't know where, I don't think it didn't make it all the way through, but it would be really interesting, because if that happens, then definitely they would want accountability for that. So we're trying to get ahead of it.
And NGA had a really good peer learning academy and work-based learning as well, and all those materials are out there, and they're definitely worth the look.
Who is that? National Governors Association, you said? Okay.
Yeah, Amanda Winters is like your one-stop shop for many things.
Mm-hmm. We have state-funded apprenticeships on our ETPL as well, in case anybody was curious about that.
So I think that's a good place to end. I want to thank our guests, Robert, Dana, and Lesley, for being here. This was great. We had over 100 people in attendance, I think, which is awesome. It might be one of the largest ones we've had. But we will, if you haven't joined our listserv, you can through the State Noncredit Data Project site up here that I have the QR code for, and we'll be in touch about future meetings. But otherwise, I feel like a teacher here. I'm going to let you out a minute early. And I really appreciate everyone coming. So thank you so much, and see you soon.